Welcome to episode 9 of the Power Podcast, presented by Power Magazine and PowerMag.com.
The Power Podcast is the latest offering from the longest-running power industry publication in the world. Established in 1882, the Power brand is dedicated to providing its global audience with news and information important to the power generation industry. Now here's the host of the Power Podcast, Executive Editor Aaron Larson.
On this episode of the Power Podcast, I'm joined by Amir Adnani, founder of Uranium Energy Corporation, which is a U.S.-based uranium mining and exploration company. Amir has been the president and CEO of the company since its inception in January of 2005. Welcome to the show, Amir.
Thank you for having me, Aaron. I think this is it's nice to connect with you, and first time you and I are getting together, but I realize we have much in common, and topics we like to cover, I think, are the same. So this is going to be good. Yeah,
well, thank you for agreeing to come on the program. And the first thing I'd kind of like to touch on is kind of the state of the nuclear industry and what you see happening around the world. There are a lot of plants under construction, particularly in China, Russia. Saudi Arabia is talking about it. So what do you see in the world market, and where's it headed?
I think nuclear power, in my mind, is more and more becoming a clean air story. And I think when I look at what's driving the growth in China and India and the largest cities in China and India, it's to really deal with a very dire air quality situation and crisis that they have over there. And so when you look at the need for highly reliable base load and emission-free energy, these are the characteristics that are still the key drivers for nuclear power and uranium demand, not only in the U.S., but across the globe. And it's not just the China-India story. We've seen tremendous numbers and announcements come out of Saudi Arabia just over the last 2 weeks that, frankly, I don't think it's getting enough media attention, and I can dig into that for you if you like. But at the same time, I think often programs like what United Arab Emirates has been doing to develop their nuclear power capability for electricity generation have often, again, don't get enough coverage, but actually they're tremendous successes. But one thing I like to point on is this. Here as we entered 2018, it's early in the year, and we're probably about 45 days out from the 8-year anniversary of the Fukushima incident in Japan, right? Or 7-year anniversary, I should say, excuse me. So March of 2011, and here we are approaching March of 2018. And we've turned a corner, in my opinion, because if you actually look at the numbers today, there's currently more operable reactors, about 447, and more reactors planned, proposed, and under construction, which is another 566, than there were in March 2011 pre-Fukushima. Now, that's interesting, right? Because the sector's had a difficult time over the last 7 years, but I think we've truly turned a corner, and this definitely to me now looks to be growth. There's growth in the global nuclear power industry for the reasons that we talked about.
That's a great point. You know, a lot of people think of Fukushima kind of putting the clamps on nuclear power, and everybody kind of pulled back and said, do we really want to build these plants? But it has come back around, and we are seeing more plants being built, and the renaissance that was talked about and predicted is happening around the world. So what does that mean to you, for instance, as a mining company?
We're seeing, in terms of the numbers as we enter 2018, we're noticing some kind of, let's say, unusual dynamics. Unusual in the sense that the demand drivers for uranium are definitely heading in the right direction, and that's to do, again, with nuclear power expansion that we talked about. Having said that, uranium prices are actually at a decade low. Uranium prices are hovering around $22 per pound. And most of last year, if you spoke to me or anyone in the uranium industry, they would say to you, these prices are unsustainable because it's hardly any mine in the world that can make money at these prices. So we're kind of fallen to that level where you see it happen with other energy commodities, right? Oil prices fall too low, or anything that from a commodity point of view falls below the average cost of production or most producers' cost of production. and you're expected to see a kind of response. And we got the right response last year. Last year, towards the end of the year, we saw major production cuts. The world's biggest uranium producers announced significant cuts, such that I feel the market is rebalanced quite a bit. Now, we may be just kind of there this year in terms of having a slight supply deficit that then should underpin an improvement in the uranium price. But to put it in perspective, I think we're entering 2018 with global production expected to be just below 140 million pounds for the year, compared to 180 million pounds of projected demand. So just right there's going to be a nice sort of gap between primary supply, which would be production, and demand for power generation. Now, the gap will be filled through inventories and secondary market sources. So this is a very common characteristic in the uranium business, where you have above-ground inventories. This could be inventories that have been built up over the years by Japanese utilities, or it could be from other sources in the market. The Department of Energy, for example, has some material that they sell. So the secondary sources do supply the market, but secondary sources are finite in quantity, and those are also declining. So suffice to say, I think we're entering 2018 with one of the best sort of market fundamentals favoring higher uranium prices. It's been a difficult uranium market over the last 6 years, coming on to 7 years now since Fukushima. But again, given the growing demand for nuclear power, which translates to increasing demand for uranium, and the fact that there's been a real underinvestment in uranium exploration and mining due to the low uranium price environment, we're at that very interesting point. Supply cuts will take material off the market. There's not enough new mines to respond to any kind of price increases quickly, which means hopefully I think we will have a period of prolonged higher prices in front of us to counteract this very prolonged bear market that we've had since 2011.
So that all sounds really good for your side of the supply and demand chain. How is that going to affect the power plants when they're purchasing fuel and when they're trying to basically turn a profit in a very difficult electric market?
Yeah, and I think that's the issue right now. Let's maybe zoom in on the U.S. side of it. I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's enough data available that does demonstrate that the cost for purchasing uranium should make up a very small overall percentage of the cost of electricity generation for a nuclear power plant. But that aside, let's just kind of recap what's happening in the U.S. right now. In the U.S., as you know, it's been a very difficult go for nuclear power just due to what's happening in some of the kind of merchant markets or wholesale markets where natural gas is providing a lot of competition. Renewables, with getting their subsidies, are also providing a lot of competition. And in my opinion, there's arguably a national security crisis here, because you've got 20% of the U.S. electricity and 60% of its carbon-free electricity that's being provided by the 99 reactors that make up the U.S. nuclear fleet. Now, to put that in perspective, that's more reactors than China and India combined in terms of reactors operating. So out of the whole world today, the biggest nuclear fleet for carbon-free electricity generation is still the U.S. It's the biggest market, and it requires 50 million pounds of uranium annually. Right now, we're on track this year for U.S. uranium production, domestic supply, to fall below 1 million pounds. Again, remember, demand is projected to be 50 million pounds, and supply is expected to be less than 1 million pounds. You're talking about almost 98% dependency on sources of uranium that are not mined in the U.S., and the majority of that is actually coming from Russia and Kazakhstan. This is kind of a silly-sounding stat, but production of uranium is expected to be at its lowest point this year since 1949. So you look at that, and I think we have a couple of things going on here. I think we have to recognize that nuclear power, and this is sort of an ongoing discussion and debate out there. I mean, this idea of grid resiliency and reliability is something that obviously DOE came out and is very much focusing on. Energy Secretary Rick Perry is very much focused on it. And I think in order to have a very reliable and stable grid, we do need to have baseload power, or that basically 24/7 capacity factor that nuclear has. In a well-rounded portfolio, you've got your renewables, you've got gas and hydrocarbons, but you've got nuclear as the backbone. The backbone needs to be supported, and I think the backbone needs to be valued and recognized. But at the same time, the backbone that we talk about, those nuclear power plants, they need fuel. Without the fuel, you can't run. And the fuel is the uranium. And I can't imagine any industry. I can't imagine any domestic industry. It could be, making cotton T-shirts. It could be anything where there would be 100% or almost 100% dependency for the raw material on foreign sources. So I think there's a very interesting sort of dynamic going on here with the U.S. both nuclear power sector and the domestic uranium mining industry. They're both very much needed and should be viewed as being strategic to the energy infrastructure of the country, especially to the carbon-free energy infrastructure of the country. But I've never seen it be as sort of a tenuous of a situation as it is right now. And, it's also about jobs. There used to be at its peak with uranium mining, there used to be over 20,000 jobs in the field of U.S. uranium exploration and mining. Today, it's less than 500. And a lot of this is something that our company takes very seriously and we're very focused on because the chairman of Uranium Energy Corp is former Energy Secretary Spencer Abraham. He was the Energy Secretary in the George W. Bush administration. We can talk about that some more, but I think when you look at our company, we're looking at this dynamics in the U.S. market as something that is both a great business opportunity for our shareholders and stakeholders, but also something that has real necessity given the national and energy security aspects of what's happening with the shortage of uranium in the U.S.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that's not something you can turn around overnight. I assume it takes a while to develop a mine and to start getting real production out of it. So if you, for instance, the Kazakhstan supply went away immediately, you couldn't just open up a mine and start producing and supply that demand, could you?
No, you couldn't, because it takes time. Just to give you an idea, I have a very unique experience and vantage point. I'm probably one of the only people and entrepreneurs over the last a decade who's been directly involved with my company, Uranium Energy Corp, and permitting new uranium mines in the U.S. We now have production permits for 3 mines in our South Texas projects. We just acquired a project in the Powder River Basin of Wyoming that's also permitted. I can tell you from direct experience, it takes somewhere around 4 to 6 years, in some cases maybe 7 years, just to get the production permits, just to get the permits before you can even construct and operate. So you're absolutely right. I mean, forget about the lead time to flick a switch or hire people, but it takes permits to be able to do these things. I said uranium mining, and even though we're basically an energy commodity, we are way more regulated than oil and gas would be, or coal mining would be. It takes a long time. That's the barrier to entry. And that's why, again, this is such a strategic issue to consider. If for some geopolitical reason, uranium coming from Uzbekistan or Niger in Africa or Russia or Kazakhstan, which constitutes, I believe, over half of the current U.S. imports, which is astounding numbers, somehow there was some kind of disruption to that. There would be, you're talking about a multi-year lead time in the U.S. to be able to replace that. And that's why you got to get on with it now. That's why again, that for any industry, there needs to be some degree of domestic self-sufficiency when it comes to the raw materials, when it comes to the expertise, when it comes to what is needed to keep the viability of that industry. And right now, the viability of 99 nuclear reactors operating in the U.S., generating electricity for 1 in every 5 homes, is seriously at risk when you consider this issue around uranium and lack of domestic sources of uranium as the fuel for this kind of power generation.
Along those same lines, the nuclear industry in America, as far as new build construction, obviously we've got the Vogtle plant under construction in Georgia. That's the only new plant being built in the U.S. But, in the same manner that you have to come up with the labor and the people and the expertise to mine, the construction companies need to come up with the same expertise to build. So what can be done there?
And this is, I think, sort of where we need to have the vision and we need to look forward, because there's a great sort of takeaway here where I often keep hearing people talk about, natural gas is very cheap, and nothing against natural gas, and we've got this incredible shale revolution that has taken place in the U.S. that has turned the U.S. into a powerhouse when it comes to hydrocarbon output, and rightfully so. And I see it in South Texas, where our projects are very much in the same formations and regions as things like the Eagle Ford Shale, for example. I see it. But if you think about a vision moving forward and you think about the kind of energy mix we need to have moving forward, look at Saudi Arabia for a second. How can anyone dispute Saudi Arabia's role as the leading hydrocarbon producer and exporter in the world? And despite that, as part of a program that they've launched called the Saudi 2030 Vision, their goal over the next 12 years is to focus singularly on reducing Saudi Arabia's dependency on fossil fuels and diversifying their energy mix, and doing it in a way where they can create high-paying jobs domestically, bring in significant amount of expertise within their population when it comes to education around math and physics and science to support a very significant nuclear power program, and at the same time of creating economic activity, create low-cost carbon-free electricity generation at home so that they can continue selling their hydrocarbons internationally. And look at, again, I talked about it at the outset of this interview, look at what they've announced recently. They have announced that this year they're awarding the construction contracts for the first reactors that they're going to be building in that country. This is going to be the first couple of reactors out of 17 that they're going to be building. Over the next 20 years, we're talking about an $80 billion investment for Saudi Arabia to expand its nuclear power program as part of this Saudi Vision 2030. It's, again, this national plan to reduce their country's dependency on oil, diversify the economy, diversify the energy mix. And if you just benchmark this for a second to what the UAE has done, United Arab Emirates, on a smaller scale, they've developed 2 reactors so far that are supposed to come on the grid in April of this year. Out of 4, there's going to be 2 more that being developed that's under construction. 25% of UAE electricity will be generated by nuclear power by 2021. It's remarkable. That's another hydrocarbon-rich country. The jobs being created around those industries are phenomenal. The local talent and the expertise that are being developed, these are long-term projects, these nuclear power plants, once developed, that can operate for 40 to 50 years. You're talking about real cornerstones in your energy matrix and in your economy. Saudi is going to do what the UAE has done successfully, but on a much larger scale, 16 or 17 reactors in Saudi versus 4 in UAE. And again, the capital and the commitment, the government commitment is all there. And we could be looking at a very similar kind of ambitious program in Saudi as we've seen in China and India. And again, this is what's fueling this growth in the global nuclear power industry. So coming back to the U.S., I think we need to have that kind of vision, and we need to recognize the kind of economic engine that developing and having a thriving nuclear power industry could have. There's some excellent new research being done by the millennial generation. I think it's very fascinating for nuclear power to also become more embraced and by the millennial generation who are seeking ways to also decarbonize the economy. And so when you look back at sort of where the industry is in the U.S., hopefully we turn a corner on a number of fronts, including the issues around Westinghouse with Brookfield Partners coming in now. Hopefully that business and that issue around the challenges that they've had gets turned around. And we can go truly to back in recognizing that there's an international leadership role that the U.S. nuclear power industry has, and it's about reactors at home and jobs at home and energy diversification at home. But it's also about recognizing these broader global trends that are taking place and being a part of that and leading that, and having those longer term visions.
Another question that comes to mind as we're sitting here talking is there a likelihood that we'll ever run out of uranium?
Well, first of all, uranium, like any other mineral, requires dollars to be spent in exploration. And it's amazing how new exploration using new modern techniques can really revolutionize our understanding of available resources. Since 2012, I want to say that investment in mineral resource exploration, or just exploration in general in the U.S., is down 90%. And prior to that, there wasn't a whole lot more going on. I got to tell you, in the field of mineral exploration, we're talking about exploration, whether it's for, and even in hydrocarbon exploration, you know, and your audience would know, how much has happened in terms of new technological advancements, new advancements in geophysics, geochemistry techniques and tools and drilling, etc., in the last 5 years, yet alone the last 10 years, yet alone the last 15 years. And what I want to say is that the last sort of 10 to 15 years, we've seen very little in terms of new exploration for uranium, especially in the U.S., because there really has not been the right framework to incentivize and encourage people, whether it's the commodity price being too low or the very kind of onerous, long lead kind of timelines associated with permitting. Recently, in 2015 and again in 2017, the U.S. Geological Survey published reports talking about how some of the best potential for finding new uranium deposits with world-class potential is in the state of Texas, and particularly the South Texas Uranium Belt, basically the area from south of Houston all the way down to the border with Mexico, very much overlapping some of the hydrocarbon plays like the Eagle Ford Shale. Well, this is exactly what our company has been focused on since 2005. I mean, since 2005, we have been focused on acquiring properties in the U.S. in places like South Texas, where we're a true leader in terms of having acquired over 70,000 acres of mineral lease with uranium, obviously, as our main focus, made new discoveries, developed new projects, and where we have our infrastructure advantage with our Hobson processing plant, which is a uranium processing plant, fully built, fully permitted. It has a physical capacity of 2 million pounds per year, and it's located about an hour just south of San Antonio. So when I look at, again, my own personal experience here as an entrepreneur, as the CEO of Uranium Energy Corp, we're a U.S. company, and we're a company that set up shop in 2005 in Texas and took the view that, hey, this is sort of longer term unsustainable. The U.S. can't just continue to import all of its uranium from foreign sources. When I started, there was 90% of uranium being imported. I can't believe that the number has actually gone up because, again, the sector's had difficulties globally with Fukushima and whatnot. But now as we come to turn the corner, you have a situation that has to change. And what I'm really thinking, and I've been planning for 13 years now, is how to build the foundation to have a company that can lead U.S. production of uranium higher. Uranium Energy Corp today not only has fully permitted projects, infrastructure advantage in Texas. We have a project in Wyoming called Reno Creek that has a license to be able to produce 2 million pounds per year. We have the physical capacity in Texas of 2 million pounds per year. So we have just to start the potential to get it to 4 million pounds per year using a very low-cost, environmentally friendly way of mining uranium called in-situ recovery. We have the team. No other uranium company has a former U.S. Energy Secretary as chairman to understand government relations, have a team in place that's built and operated mines. And then our whole view here has been to stay unhedged. We're a 100% unhedged producer. We want to sell uranium into a rising uranium price environment, and that's great for our shareholders. But I tell you right now, for the first time, I think we also have more stars aligning, where I think in Washington, D.C., I think the different sort of branches of government are looking at this national security issue around the dependency on foreign uranium. And I think there also is a stronger sense of appreciating that, hey, the domestic uranium industry needs to be a thriving industry. And again, it's an exciting time to be witnessing all of this, the global trends, the domestic issues, but to have spent 13 years building a company and putting the building blocks in place to be positioned to be a leader when the sector very much needs leadership, and there's a vacuum where I think it's an exciting time to be positioned to be going for becoming the largest U.S. uranium producer.
I've already taken up a lot more time than I had anticipated, but I've got one more question for you, and that involves the people out there who look at nuclear and they say, why invest in nuclear? We should be investing in wind and solar and renewables that are less dangerous or have less risk. What would you say to those people?
I would just go back to what I said at the very beginning. The nuclear story is a clean air story, and I would look at the fact that you have to have a bigger picture view when you are talking about this. You have to look at the fact that there's 7 billion people in the world, and we're basically growing towards 9 billion people. Electricity demand is going to be on the rise. I mean, it's the fastest growing segment of the energy sort of profile is electricity. There's 40% increase in electricity demand as the world becomes more affluent, richer, wealthier, and whether it's the trends around electric vehicles, whether it's trends around mining cryptocurrencies, which requires a ton of electricity, just about every new trend that can define the next 50 to 100 years of humanity will require more and more electricity. So when we are looking at how to satisfy the needs, the electricity needs, the growing electricity needs, the 7 billion people in the world on our way to 9 billion, if we don't rely on ways of doing this on a carbon emission-free way, doing it in a way so that we decarbonize the economy at the same time as meeting the electricity needs, we're going to suffocate. I mean, literally, we're going to suffocate. That's why I said it's a clean air story. And you don't need to think that I'm making a sensationalist comment, because all you need to do is look at what's happening in 20 or 30 of the largest cities in China and India and look at the air pollution quality that they're having in those cities and why they need to decarbonize. And literally it's because they can't breathe. So again, I go back to the fact that we need, in order to have a diversified energy mix, you need to have energy sources that can work at 95% capacity factor. Nuclear power is 95% capacity factor. Other sources are not. Nuclear power has its own disadvantages. It might cost a lot of money up front to build it, but it's 95% capacity factor, and it will be there 24/7, 365 days a year, and it will be there on a much longer-term basis with predictability around the fuel. The fuel makes very little incremental difference in the overall cost. We can't say the same thing about natural gas or other sources, but natural gas has its own advantages. I think a portfolio approach is the way to go, and I think anyone that kind of looks at why we need investments in nuclear power has to understand that the strengths and advantages that nuclear power possesses, other energy sources simply do not possess. And in order to, again, satisfy this hunger, this incredible hunger for electricity, we need to have that baseload carbon-free electricity generation available. And we're seeing, I think, all the trends and all the major investments taking place, and why today, for the first time, there's more reactors operable under construction, proposed and planned, than pre-Fukushima, I think is a testament to that point of view.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Amir. Is there anything else that you want to mention before we cut this off?
I just encourage anyone who's interested to learn more about my company and what we're doing to visit our website at www.uraniumenergy.com. And actually, we just posted a brand new presentation up there that I gave recently on the homepage. You can take a look at that. And you can follow us on Twitter at Uranium Energy. And I look forward to hopefully reconnecting with you and coming back and having a further discussion. I think this went longer than you and I anticipated, but hopefully you find the content and what we discussed helpful.
Oh, I think it's very interesting, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to speak with me, and I will definitely contact you again to do a follow-up. Thanks a lot, Amir.
Thank you very much.
And with that, this episode of the Power Podcast has come to an end. I'd like to thank Amir for joining me, and thank you for listening. Watch for the next episode of the Power Podcast coming soon.